The Dallas Stars have taken a lot of positive steps over the last few games, but here on Black Friday, they're going to look to buy a win against the Colorado Avalanche. On today's show, I'll give you a full preview of tonight's matchup with our old division rivals up in Colorado. All of this coming up on a Black Friday edition of Locked On Stars.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis. It is Friday, November 26th. I hope that each and every one of you had a fantastic Thanksgiving. I know that I did. Glad to have the day off yesterday, but glad to be back here with you guys previewing this big matchup against the Colorado Avalanche. Really excited to preview that game. A lot of excitement around this game and should be really interesting. But before we jump into everything, I got to let you know that today's episode is brought to you by Stat Hero. Stat Hero is the first of its kind daily fantasy sports platform where it's you versus the house in head-to-head fantasy matchups, winner take all. So sign up for free right now at stathero.com/hockey and use promo code hockey for a 100% deposit match. And also, before we jump in, I do want to take a moment and say thank you for stopping by today's episode of Locked On Stars. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. I truly do appreciate you stopping by every single day here at Locked On Stars. Be sure to subscribe and follow the podcast wherever you get your podcasts at, whether that's on a podcasting platform or on YouTube as well. But without any further hesitation, let's jump right into a preview of tonight's matchup with the Colorado Avalanche. The Colorado Avalanche is another team that the Dallas Stars have not seen in quite some time. And I'm sure, as many of you know, the last time that these two teams met, it was dramatic and it was insane. It was one of the craziest playoff series in NHL history, especially in recent NHL history. And it thankfully ended in the favor of the Dallas Stars. I'm sure many of us still have happy dreams, happy memories of Joel Kiviranta sending in that dagger game-winning goal to finish off his hat trick in Game 7 of the Western Conference semifinals back in 2020 in the Edmonton bubble to send the Avalanche home packing after they had been picked by many to, make it to the Stanley Cup Finals and potentially win the Stanley Cup Finals. And they got sent home in the second round of the playoffs that season, thanks to Joel Kiviranta and company. One of the craziest games I've ever watched, one of the craziest playoff series I've ever watched, and especially that game. I know I've talked about it on the show before. I think one of my first episodes as host, I had tested positive for COVID back in August, late August, early September 2020, and was back home at my parents' house because I was at college at the time, quarantined in my room by myself, and I had brought my smaller TV. You'll see it behind me if you're watching on YouTube, with me, and I had it hooked up, and I was watching every game that they played. I was watching pretty much every playoff game because I really had nothing better to do. And I was hanging on to every bit of that game, and to see that goal go in, absolutely insane. It was incredible. But this Avalanche team was very good back then, and they are still very, very good now. And they have a lot of good talent on this team. One of the biggest names on this team is Nathan MacKinnon, who we will likely not see tonight due to a lower body injury that he suffered back earlier in the month of November against the Columbus Blue Jackets. The timetable for his return was about 2 or 3 weeks. Coming up on tonight's game, it'll have been about 2.5 weeks, I believe, since his injury against Columbus. So I don't think that he will be making a return against Dallas tonight, but I think, that he's going to be coming back soon to this Colorado team. He has been off just to a tough start this season and had a very weird season. The first 2 games of the season for the Avalanche, McKinnon did not play because he had COVID-19. But he came in for a little bit, and I think he has 10 points so far this season, 1 goal and 9 assists. But the team seems to be doing pretty fine without him. And they seem to be getting along where they're at least treading water at this point, starting to slowly kind of, get their head comfortably above water. Colorado currently sits at a record of 10-5-1, tied for fourth in the Central Division with the Nashville Predators at 21 points. And like I said, with Nathan MacKinnon, but also just this team as a whole, this season didn't really start the way that they wanted it to. I know myself, as well as many other people, had the Colorado Avalanche as favorites to win the division and potentially even favorites to win the Stanley, to win the Western Conference and even potentially the Stanley Cup Finals. And I believe as of right now, a lot of odds makers still have them as the favorite to win the Stanley Cup this year. So this is a very, very good team, and they are playing some of the best hockey that they've played so far this season, as they're currently in the middle of a 6-game win streak. So it looks like Dallas will have another opportunity to break another streak of an opponent that comes through the American Airlines Center. Last time the Dallas Stars took the ice on Tuesday against the Edmonton Oilers, they ended Connor McDavid's 17-game point streak, and tonight they'll be looking to end Colorado's 6-game winning streak. But it's going to be a difficult thing to do. That is easier said than done. Some of Colorado's wins over this 6-game win streak have been very, very impressive. They have a 7-1 win over the Vancouver Canucks, and then a few days later, they played the Canucks again, beat them 4-2. They have a 6-2 win over the San Jose Sharks, a 7-3 win over Seattle, and a 5-2 win over Anaheim. Obviously, some of those teams I named, especially at the beginning, Vancouver, San Jose, and Seattle, not the cream of the crop in the National Hockey League by any stretch of the imagination, but they blew those teams out, and that's what you expect a good team like Colorado to do, is to blow the bad teams like Vancouver, San Jose, and Seattle out of the water. And then Anaheim, a pretty dang good team so far this season, they beat pretty soundly 5-2. And how have they been doing that? I talked about McKinnon, who's missed a significant amount of time this season and is continuing to miss time. So what have the Avalanche done, or rather, who have they had on their team that's been leading the way? Well, Nazim Kadri, a former Toronto Maple Leaf who has recently, over the past several seasons, been with the Colorado Avalanche, has been on fire to start this season. Last year, in 56 games played, he had 32 points. And as of right now, he has 25 through 16 games played so far this season. So Kadri off to a fantastic start. The veteran in this league, like I said, he was a member of the Toronto Maple Leafs organization for a long time, now doing great things with the Avalanche. He's definitely going to be a guy to keep an eye on tonight, a guy that's going to be looking to make an impact on the game with his scoring, but also his passing. Cale Makar, a guy we've talked about on this show as well, one of the best young defensemen in this league. He is definitely in the conversation with guys like Adam Fox of the New York Rangers, Charlie McAvoy of the Boston Bruins, and of course, Miro Heiskanen here in Dallas. Cale Makar, 23 years old, a stud defenseman for this Avalanche team. He leads the Avalanche in goals with another fantastic player. He has scored 6 goals in their previous 4 games. So, he's on quite a bit of a tear offensively, especially with putting the puck in the net, even as a defenseman. Obviously can play defense well, but as of recently has been a little bit more of an offensive-minded defenseman. So definitely something to keep an eye out on, and something that our guys that are playing up the blue line are going to have to be mindful of, especially when it comes to the puck getting thrown at the net, is trying to do what Dallas did last game against Edmonton, and that is to block shots and interfere with the passing lanes. Some other guys to be on the lookout for this on this Colorado team, obviously the captain, Gabriel Landeskog, having a nice season so far with 17 points, always a guy to be on the lookout for if you've been watching the NHL for any amount of time. The captain of this team, the leader of this team, a fantastic player, always a guy that you need to be mindful of in Landeskog. Mikko Rantanen has 7 goals and 7 assists so far this season. Another guy that's a fantastic player, but maybe his name can occasionally get drowned out by some of the other big names on this team. But definitely a guy that can do a lot of damage, and a guy that Stars fans, and the Stars in general, are no strangers to, and definitely know to keep an eye on Rantanen, as he is a very, very good hockey player. And like I said, I've just named several guys. This team has so much talent, and they just need everyone to be healthy to really achieve their full potential. And they're starting to get healthier. Hopefully, well, I say hopefully as if I'm cheering for them, but hopefully for them, I'm sure their fans are thinking this, and their team is thinking this once they have everyone back, and once they start stringing together some wins. Hopefully, if they're going to do that, it's after tonight, after they lose to the Dallas Stars. They imagine, I'm sure, that they're going to find themselves right back at the top of the Central Division, right back where they thought they were going to be, or at least competing for that top spot in the division, and potentially the top spot in the conference, because this team definitely has the talent to do so. They have just kind of had some things not roll their way to start the season, but it seems like they're starting to figure things out. But the Dallas Stars are also seeming to figure some things out right now at this point in the season. So that's going to make this matchup very, very interesting. Well, coming up next, we're going to take a moment and look at some of the matchups and things to be on the lookout for in tonight's matchup between the Dallas Stars and the Colorado Avalanche. But before we do that, I do want to take a moment and say thank you to one of the sponsors of today's episode, and that is Stat Hero. No one plays daily fantasy sports to lose. Winning feels so much better. But traditional fantasy sports are a long-term losing proposition because you never know who or what you're up against. Stat Hero is the first of its kind in daily fantasy sports, a platform where it's you versus the house in head-to-head fantasy matchups, winner take all. And here's the crazy part. Stat Hero shows you their lineups before you play, and you handpick the team you want to face one-on-one. This never-before-seen innovation of a fantasy sports and sports betting hybrid has a Stat Hero player's clocking odds that are over 4 times better. Why? Because you don't have to compete against thousands of experts or unknowns. Stat Hero puts you in control of your fate. With Stat Hero, you are in control of the stakes. You decide how much you're going to play, and Stat Hero has no choice but to take it because they're daring you to beat them. Stat Hero head-to-head is what daily fantasy should be, one-on-one. So sign up for free right now at stathero.com/hockey and use promo code hockey for a 100% deposit match. That's stathero.com/hockey. Use promo code hockey for a 100% match. Stathero.com/hockey, promo code hockey. Terms and conditions apply. Moving on to the next segment of today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. I want to take a moment and talk about some of the matchups to be on the lookout for tonight. And in general, just some storylines and things to be mindful of as this game unfolds. The first of those being the special teams for both of these squads. Colorado's penalty kill is ranked 27th in the NHL in overall percentage, while Dallas's power play percentage is ranked at 3rd in the league, only behind Edmonton and St. Louis, who they have beaten in their past 2 games, might I add. So, and then this power play in general is starting to catch fire. A few games ago, Dallas's power play goal streak came to an end, but then, the next game it picks right back up. The power play is playing very, very well right now. It scored 2 goals against Edmonton the other night. While Edmonton, they kept Edmonton off the board on the power play, which is going to be important to see how Dallas's PK continues to hopefully build off of a solid performance from Tuesday. But the penalty kill definitely been very inconsistent this year, and definitely not where I know Coach Bonus and the rest of the coaching staff want to see the penalty kill, because they know how great it can be when it's truly at its best. And Dallas is going to have their work cut out for them on the penalty kill if they can't stay out of the penalty box, because Colorado's power play, while it's not Dallas's, is definitely no joke. It is ranked 10th in the league at overall percentage. So they are a very good team on the man advantage. And Dallas needs to follow their same strategy that they followed on Tuesday against Edmonton, and that is to stay out of the penalty box at all costs, because if Dallas is going to, have any chance to win this game, they need to execute on the man advantage and not allow their opponents to execute on the man advantage, let alone have opportunities on the man advantage. Because guys like Kadri, who lead the team in power play goals with 3, can very much make you pay for putting a team like Colorado on the man advantage on a consistent basis. And though they won't really be matched up, obviously Miro Heiskanen versus Cale Makar is one of the biggest matchups to look out for. Like I said, not necessarily going to be matched up against one another, but they both play defensemen. They're both, like I said, studs in this league, guys that are going to be in the Norris Trophy conversation throughout this entire season. And this is going to be the first of many matchups this season that we get to see them go head to head. Carrying on the same responsibilities just for their respective teams. And we're going to get to see who plays better and who does their job better. Miro coming off one of his best games of the season, pretty much keeping Connor McDavid in a jar, keeping him pretty much ineffective. And so hopefully Miro can do that with some of these really talented forwards on this Colorado squad. I believe, I would imagine Miro would be on a guy like Kadri for most of the game, while Makar will have his hands full with someone on Dallas's top line. or maybe, taking turns going from Pavelski to Rupe to Jason Robertson. But I think both of these guys are going to be up to the challenge of defending the talented forwards on both of these teams. And it's going to be incredibly fun to watch. Always fun to watch, kind of the individual player matchups within the game. It's kind of like a game within a game, as Matt DeFranks of the Dallas Morning News said on Twitter when talking about Miro versus McDavid last time around. And I think we're going to see a lot of that in tonight's game, and I'm very, very excited to watch it unfold. We didn't really talk about goalies in the last segment, but I do anticipate that we will see former Arizona Coyote Darcy Kuemper between the pipes tonight for the Colorado Avalanche. And he's a proven goalie. He's having an okay season so far with a .905 save percentage, but he's had some rough moments this season. Definitely, some high highs and some low lows, very similar to Braden Holtby. And I guess Anton Hudobin, even though I feel like Hudobin has maybe had one or two really nice moments, and the rest has been mediocre to below mediocre so far this season. But I think, if Dallas can make Darcy Kuemper work and put him under a lot of pressure, especially early in the game, I think that they have a really good shot to win this game, or at least be competitive in it and potentially force overtime if they're being overwhelmed by Colorado. I think if they can put Darcy in a tough position where he's not necessarily able to get comfortable, that I think, Dallas puts themselves in a really, really nice position to win this hockey game and score a good amount of goals, especially early in the game, because we've seen that good things tend to happen when Dallas scores first, and if they're able to score multiple goals before the other team can even get on the scoreboard. And speaking of goalies, talking on the other end for the Stars, I do hope that we see Jake Ottinger between the pipes. I'm sure by the time you're probably hearing this episode, some news has come out on who's, skating around at morning skate and who's going to be starting for the team. I hope personally that we see Jake Ottinger take the ice again, especially because Dallas, is playing the first game of a back-to-back, and Colorado clearly the better team of these two teams that Dallas is going to play. They're going to play Arizona on Saturday on the road. But I would feel much more confident with Hudobin in the net on Saturday against the Coyotes and start Braden Holtby tonight, because, you got to continue to feed the hot hand. That is, something that can be said across all sports, and it's no different in hockey, and it's no different in hockey for goalies. Jake Ottinger has played phenomenal so far this season through his 3 starts. I think he's playing some of the best hockey of his career right now between the pipes, and I want to continue to see him do that. And I think tonight is a great opportunity for him to continue to prove why he belongs at the NHL right now. If he's able to, shut down a team as talented as Colorado, I think that, that's something the coaching staff definitely has to take into account, because he's already shut down some other really good teams so far this season. And so this is going to be a big test for Jake if he does get the start. And if we see someone else in goal, I guess I can't say I'll be too surprised, but I will be a little upset, because I think Jake Ottinger gives the Stars the best chance to win this game tonight. Well, coming up next to close out today's episode of Locked On Stars, we'll walk through some of my predictions and final thoughts on tonight's matchup with the Colorado Avalanche. But before we do that, I do want to take a moment and say thank you to another sponsor of today's episode, and that is BetOnline. It's Thanksgiving time. It's still kind of the holiday weekend. And we all know what that means. Football. There's tons of sports happening right now. Football is not over by any means, despite the games that we saw on Thursday. And nothing goes better with football and turkey than betting. BetOnline has you covered all holiday season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this holiday season. Head to the new updated desktop or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus with promo code LOCKEDON. And it's not just football. BetOnline has pro and college basketball, NHL, boxing, UFC, and even your favorite Vegas casino games. So don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available in the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. And to close out today's episode of Locked On Stars, I want to take a moment before we conclude to just kind of walk through some predictions and final thoughts on this matchup between the Stars and the Avalanche, the first meeting since the 2020 playoffs in the Edmonton bubble. With that, I think that's going to be fresh on a lot of these players' minds. So this game should be very competitive. It's always competitive when these teams get together, division rivals. You can argue, anyone to be Dallas's biggest rival. I don't think Colorado is their biggest rival, but these two teams don't necessarily like each other, and they're always competitive. And I think that the 2020 playoffs just added some spark to the flame that already existed. And so this should be a very fun, physical, competitive game, very entertaining for the fans to watch. I expect a lot of fireworks in tonight's game, both, with the scoring in the net, but also just when it comes to the hits on the board and the hits in general. Going to be a ton of fun to watch. And also just two teams that started the year slow, two teams that did not start the year that how they wanted to or how they anticipated that they would, and slowly but surely finding their way back to relevancy within the Central Division and looking to climb the ranks back up into the top of the division and, maybe eventually the conference. I think Colorado's a few steps ahead in that race with Dallas, but, a win here definitely solidifies Dallas as a team that should not be counted out by any stretch of the imagination so far in this season. Still a lot of work to do at this point, and even if Dallas wins this game, a lot of work to be done after that. But winning this game would be absolutely huge for the morale of the team, and I think also huge for the rest of the hockey world to see that the Dallas Stars are not done, even though it is early in the season, but that they're not done and that they're coming back to, fight with the top dogs in this league. And Dallas has been hot at home lately, and I don't anticipate that stopping now. I don't see why, that they would just start playing really, really bad at home. Even though, if they did the Dallas Stars are full of surprises sometimes, for better or for worse. But they've played very, very well at the American Airlines Center over the past few weeks, and I think that's going to continue to be the case. A Friday night crowd on a holiday weekend, I imagine the building will be packed, filled with loud, rowdy fans, always exciting, always a fun atmosphere. And I think the Stars players are going to feed off of that. And I think that, win or lose, that they're going to put out a good effort and put on a good show for the fans in attendance. But I do predict that Dallas will win this game by a score of 4-2. As far as first goal, I know I predicted it last game, but I think Alexander Radulov will score first in this game. He played very, very well in that 2020 playoff series against the Avs back in the Edmonton bubble. I don't know how many of you remember this. I didn't really know this or remember this until I was doing my research for today's episode, but it was almost Alexander Radulov who could have had that hat trick in Game 7 against the Avs instead of Kiviranta. Dallas had 5 goals that game. Kiviranta had 3. Alexander Radulov had the other 2. So it could have very well have been Alexander Radulov with that hat trick in that Game 7. But not just in Game 7. He scored a lot of goals in that series, played very well in that series. So I imagine, that hopefully some of that will carry over into this game. So Alexander Radulov scores the first goal of the game for the Stars. That is my prediction. And overall, I think Dallas has the opportunity to have a huge night. I think, they're coming off rest after playing, not since Tuesday, as is Colorado. They're off rest too, but they are having to travel to Dallas. Dallas is, been here at home. Their players have had some time off, but I think that they'll stay ready. This is a veteran team that hopefully, if they're prepared the right way, that they hopefully won't come out stale. I think, if they don't come out stale and they play hard, they play fast, that they can pounce, on this Colorado team and take an early lead. And like I said, good things have happened so far this season when Dallas is able to establish a nice lead early in the game. And they certainly do need to win this game and carry some momentum into Saturday when they travel to Arizona to take on the Coyotes, because as we know, the Arizona Coyotes are not very good this season, but always hard to play back-to-back in the NHL, especially when you're having to travel. You play a game on Friday and then you have to play a game in another city the next day. That's very difficult to do, even against a team that's not very good, a team that Dallas is better than and should beat. But, they need to, one, focus on this game tonight against the Avalanche and then carry the momentum that they hopefully gain from a win to Saturday against Arizona to get 2 huge back-to-back division wins. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked on Stars. Be sure to tune in on Monday and we'll break down Saturday's game against the Coyotes and get you caught up on any storylines that may develop over the weekend. Thank you again for making Locked on Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day Locked on Bets, your daily one-stop shop for all of your gambling needs. The Locked on Bets podcast, hosted by your boy Q, with expert analysis and insight from Lee Sterling. Be sure to subscribe and follow the show wherever you get your podcasts at. Be sure to tell a friend about the show or leave a review if you like what you hear on your favorite podcasting platform. You can follow me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE 2_LEWIS. You can also follow the show on Twitter at Locked on Stars. I truly do appreciate all the follows, likes, retweets, reviews, subscriptions, you name it. You guys are the best. You guys continue to support the show and myself, and I truly do appreciate that very, very much. Thank you guys so much for listening. Have a wonderful day. Have a great weekend. If you're going to either of the games this weekend here in Dallas, or if you're in Arizona and you're going to be at that game, hope you enjoy yourself. Be safe, have fun, and we will see you guys back here on Monday for another edition of Locked On Stars.